Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Suits and Laterals podcast. I'm Jeff Rich, alongside Chris Green, to break down everything going on the field and off the field in the NFL. We know that it's not all about what happens on the gridiron. Sometimes it's what happens in the boardroom. Plenty of things moving and shaking in the NFL, but we'll start with a look back at the wild card round in the NFL playoffs. Quick recap on the scores. Kansas City goes into Houston, wins 30-0. Pittsburgh takes down division rival Cincinnati 18-16 in Cincinnati. The Seahawks hold on against the Minnesota Vikings 10-9, and Green Bay pulls away in the second half for a 35-18 victory on the road in Washington, D.C., Landover, Maryland, wherever FedEx Field happens to be. But interesting week. An interesting week of playoff football. What do you say, Chris?
I don't think there was any real shockers other than how close the Seattle-Minnesota game was. I think that was really the biggest surprise of the weekend to me. I mean, we'll get into that in a minute of how the game ended, but I don't think there's really any surprises about who won. I mean, Cincinnati's one and done as usual. Obviously, there were some injury issues there that played into that. Neither of us were surprised about Kansas City taking out Houston. And, I mean, the Green Bay-Washington game was always going to be one of those toss-up games. It just depended which Packers showed up. And the Packers didn't start well, but they sure finished well.
Yeah, it looked like Washington was, I picked Washington. I also picked Houston. I thought Pittsburgh and Seattle were chalk picks, but those were my picks. Let's start. What went wrong for the Houston Texans? They took the field, they kicked the ball off, and they're down 7-0 10 seconds into the game on Niall Davis's was like a 106-yard kickoff return. So Bill O'Brien, first taste of the playoffs, just couldn't get it done, loses J.J. Watt in the third quarter. Not that it made a difference. Game was 10-0 at halftime, but Houston just couldn't get anything going on offense.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It always comes down to the quarterback. That's always what it comes down to. And Brian Hoyer, unfortunately, chose the playoff game to have his worst game of the year. And quite simply, I think that was a difference right there.
Yeah, Brian Hoyer, solid backup quarterback, but big games, not his forte. Alex Smith, however, he loses his job in Kansas City, teams up with Andy Reid, goes to Kansas City. This team wins their first playoff game in something like 25 years. Chiefs are hot, but are they hot enough to play with the big boys in the American Football Conference?
Well, I mean, that's what it's going to come down to. You have momentum versus the juggernaut. So this week, I mean, it's a big game. So I like Kansas City more than I have during the season, but I don't know if they're going to make it to the next round.
All right, we'll get into Kansas City at New England a little bit later, but big game for a couple of AFC North rivals. Pittsburgh kind of has that charge late, looked like a pretty hot football team going into play, gets out to the big lead, 15-0. Kansas City kind of scratches and claws their way back into this game, and in all reality, the odds were in their favor with Landry Jones being the guy allegedly. Roethlisberger does come in for the final drive and make something of a difference. I thought that I don't remember if it was Todman or D'Angelo Williams. I believe it was Jordan Todman where he stepped away from the pocket, floated it up, and they get a big first down in their own territory to set themselves up to for Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown to do their thing. They get to midfield, and then the rest of Pittsburgh's offense can be accredited to a couple of knucklehead moves on part of the Cincinnati Bengals defenders.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always been these jokes about the Bengals over the years they used to have all the players arrested and all that, and Cincinnati's really tried to change that image, getting rid of those guys. But then you have Vontaze Burfict. He ended up getting suspended after the game earlier this week for 3 games to start next season because the guy is a cheap shot artist. I mean, I've heard many people say it. He's a good player, but he's also a dirty player, and he definitely proved it in this game.
Yeah, I mean, as far as that play was concerned, Antonio Brown going over the middle. Pittsburgh's got the ball on the Cincinnati 47. It's an incomplete pass. It's clearly an incomplete pass. It's not even a pass interference call. it's more of a targeting call on Perfect in an unnecessary situation where he really hurts his team, and then was it Pac-Man Jones gets into the fold, and you basically have a 30-yard penalty on the result of an incomplete pass, which really would have put Pittsburgh in some dire straits. Where I believe that they were, they were in some serious quickstand with 28 seconds left. And Boswell's not the greatest kicker in the world. He's their fourth kicker this season.
Yep.
So
hey, and you know what? And the Bengals bailed him out quite simply.
Yeah, 18 seconds left. Pittsburgh kicks the game-winning field goal. Cincinnati working with basically no clock, and A.J. McCarron, who honestly didn't play too terribly. I mean, he staged a comeback, and if not for Perfect and Jones, having those brain farts, Cincinnati might be going into New England themselves this weekend.
Yeah, I mean that's what happens. I mean, you're on your backup quarterback, and you are already up against the 8 ball with that. I mean, it's a rookie quarterback as well. Well, he's not a rookie, but as a starting quarterback, he's a rookie.
He's essentially
you're already. Yeah, exactly. So you come into that game, you're behind that 8 ball. You're able to kind of tread water, keep it in there. He brings you back, gets you the lead there at the end, and your defense just lets you down with stupid mistakes. I mean, at the end of the day, he did what he needed to do, and the defense didn't do what they had to do.
Who shoulders the blame for the occurrence that happened at the end of the game to basically give Pittsburgh a great opportunity to win the game? I mean, do you put it on the personnel for signing a guy like Perfect as an undrafted free agent, taking a chance on Pac-Man Jones after the trouble that he had when he was with the Titans and also with the Cowboys a little bit? It seemed like he turned himself around, and maybe we don't isolate Pac-Man Jones because while this immature pattern of behavior exists, I think he's tabled it for such a long time that you restart the clock on him. I mean, if we're going to restart the clock on Ndamukong Suh, I think that it's only fair that we really give Jones the benefit of the doubt. I didn't really see what they flagged him for. It just seemed like he was unsportsmanlike in seeing the call, and he comes out on he does the radio interviews Monday this week and talks about how Antonio Brown essentially flopped. I watched that play, and both you and I, neither of us are Steelers fans, so we have no reason to defend Antonio Brown for any other reason than it's the right thing to do in that situation. I thought he got clobbered. I thought it was a genuine injury, and Pittsburgh going forward, if they don't have Antonio Brown and they don't have 100% Ben Roethlisberger, they're really going to struggle with the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we definitely have no love lost for Antonio Brown, especially after he stepped on our punter last year during a punt return for a touchdown. So there's definitely no love lost there. But you know what? There's dirty plays and there's not dirty plays, plain and simple. It was a dirty play. The guy's hurt, and the NFL's trying to really take those situations seriously now. So whether Pac-Man Jones wants to agree with it or said he's playing around, that there's not actually anything wrong with him, that's just poor sportsmanship. I mean, that's bitterness from a guy who wants to get somewhere and obviously didn't. But I agree with you as far as him overall. You can go back and, a lot of the stuff he had going on early on in his career, he paid his penance for it. For the most part, he's been a good soldier for the last several years. So I just think that's just more bitterness over the end result of the game than anything.
Hey, careful on that soldier speak there, Kellen Winslow, too. Hey, but the initial question, which got lost in the sauce there, was, I mean, do you put it on Marvin Lewis for having a guy like that on the field, not being able to rein him in, or do you put it on Mike Brown in the Bengals front office for not, for bringing these guys in and making Marvin Lewis work with them in the first place?
Well, I mean, you're not going to have all angels in the NFL. I mean, there's players like this on most of the teams out there if you really look at it. And in all honesty, if the guys can play, they're going to look over that stuff. Yes, you're going to have those hiccups every now and then. And in Burfict's case, you have it a little bit more. I mean, we've already had this discussion about Suh. You just got to weigh it versus their production, whether it's worth it to your team or not. Obviously, in this case, this hurt their team and cost them a chance to advance in the playoffs. So it's not like it's a regular season game where it's just one loss. This ended their season pretty much. To answer your question though, no, I don't blame Marvin Lewis. I mean, they can only hold their players accountable for so much. They can't hold their hands every play.
All right, let's talk about Marvin Lewis from more of a macro point of view. Hired in 2003, goes 8-8 in a couple seasons, gets them to the playoffs in 2005. I think that was the year that they lost Carson Palmer and really changed the trajectory of his career. But 7 playoff appearances for the Bengals, no advancing. Part of me looks at this as he's gotten the Cincinnati Bengals to the postseason 7 times since 2005. But on the other hand, he hasn't won any of those games. I mean, do you thank him for getting you to a point where you bring in someone else to get him over the hump, or do you stay the course with Marvin Lewis? I have an opinion on this, but I'd like to hear yours first, Chris.
Sure. I mean, it really depends on your ownership group, I guess, what it comes down to. And is your ownership group okay with only getting to the first round of the playoffs every year? I mean, if that's not good enough for you, if your ultimate goal is to get to the Super Bowl, then no, he shouldn't be around anymore. He should be fired because he's had plenty of chances, obviously. But if you're content with just getting to the playoffs, then he's great for you. I mean, the team is right there every year and makes the playoffs. They don't advance, but they do make the playoffs. Personally, just getting to the first round for me that many times isn't good enough. I mean, I can say as a Browns fan, getting to the playoffs once would be nice, but, I have other sports teams that just getting there frustrates the heck out of me, that they don't make the moves necessary to get that team to that final level.
All right, my take is really simple. If you get rid of Marvin Lewis, who are you going to bring in? And with that, they've got a lot of talent there in Cincinnati on both sides.
They do. They're one of the most talented teams in the AFC, to be honest.
And maybe, and not maybe, but definitely Marvin Lewis deserves a lot of credit for developing those guys. They talked about it on Monday Night Football when the Bengals were playing the Texans, how this team goes out and they get the guys from the big schools that have played in the big games. Obviously, you have your outliers, guys like Joe Flacco. I'd even throw Jimmy Garoppolo in there, even though he hasn't played a lot. Guys that don't necessarily come from the biggest schools. But, that's their strategy, and it's worked to a certain extent. Now, keep in mind, you have big hurdles to overcome with the Denver Broncos, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New England Patriots in the AFC. So, making being in the top 6 of 16, that's kind of a big deal. I can see where you want progress, but, I kind of look at it like the Pittsburgh baseball team, They've got to be pretty happy after being so inept for so many years. And the Bengals and the Pirates, there's a lot of parallels to draw. The timelines don't exactly line up, but the marginal amount of success that the Pittsburgh baseball Pirates have had and the Cincinnati football Bengals have had are really kind of not one and the same, but there's a lot of similarity between the situations, and you wonder if this is their ceiling or if there's a way that they can get over the hump, and if they can do it with Marvin Lewis, or if it's going to have to be another guy going forward. I believe that the Bengals are going to stick with Lewis at least for the 2016 season. At the end of the day, I
don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they could reevaluate and they could see if they want to move on. I mean, like I said, Lewis was hired in 2003. The AFC North, it has all kinds of stability outside of Cleveland. And speaking of that, let's transition really quickly because we just found out today, we're recording on Wednesday, that the Cleveland Browns and Hugh Jackson will likely be a match, and the Browns should introduce him a little bit later today. Browns chasing stability. They stay within the division. Jackson's got familiarity. He's the quarterback whisperer of sorts. What do you think of this hire going forward?
Any coach that can lead the Oakland Raiders, as dysfunctional as that organization is, to an 8-8 season sounds like a good hire to me.
Yeah, and keep in mind, they went 8-8 in Tom Cable's last season in 2010. 2012, Reggie McKenzie comes in. At the end of 2011, Reggie McKenzie comes in, gets his own guy in there, Dennis Allen. He goes 4-12, and he gets fired after going 0-4 in his third season. So, I mean, they definitely dropped off. I think that, if you look at Jackson's resume throughout, not a lot of red marks on it. I think that he's got all the potential in the world. I like that he's he's got head coaching experience, even if it was with the Oakland Raiders. But, that Oakland Raiders team had Jason Campbell as their opening day starter. And when he got hurt, they called Carson Palmer off the couch. His first game, in 2011 was on October 18th, and he's kept his career going, obviously after the Oakland Raiders. But I don't think that there's anything that you really knock on Jackson in Oakland, and he's obviously done well working under Jay Gruden on the offensive staff, and then when Gruden moved on to Washington, D.C., Lewis takes over as the offensive coordinator, and he's gotten the Bengals to the playoffs, and I think that Andy Dalton's gotten better every year. I thought Andy Dalton was actually really, really out of his element good in the 2015 season.
It's definitely his best season since he's turned pro, so you definitely have to give Jackson credit for that. Anywhere he's been, he's really seemed to work well with quarterbacks, as you've mentioned. He has a lot of respect from his players, and he has a lot of respect from people around the league. I mean, everywhere you hear today, I have not heard one person say anything negative about this hire. Everyone is saying this is an awesome hire. And here's the other big thing. This was, as far as we know, he was their first choice, their first and only choice, and they got him. And considering all the talk about the dysfunction of the Browns and the ineptness of the organization and all that, for them to be able to pull that off with a respected guy that other teams were interested in, I think that says a lot.
All right, moving over to the NFC, a couple of really good home run hires for both Seattle and Minnesota. Seattle going a little further back when they hired Pete Carroll a couple years ago, obviously. Seattle had to get it done on the road. The Arizona Cardinals just didn't take their foot off the gas, and Seattle had a slow start, so they go into Minnesota where it was extremely
chilly.
Cold. Yeah, it was a bit. You had to roll down the sleeves on your.
It was only -6. Come on, 30 below wind chill. That's nothing.
Oh, you live in California. I live in Arizona. It's just crazy when you watch those plays at the line of scrimmage. You could see the collective breaths just coming out. Unless the guys were in motion, if they were standing still and they were breathing, you could tell.
What always gets me though is the moron players that have no sleeves on. They're out there bare skin in that kind of weather. Then of course you get your stupid ass fans out in the stands who pull their shirts off, and you wonder how long till they're in the hospital with hypothermia. I get it. You're trying to be tough and all that, but it's okay to wear sleeves when it's that warm, guys.
All right. Minnesota gets out in front with a trio of Blair Walsh field goals. Enters the fourth quarter leading 9-0. Adrian Peterson with the fumble, gives Seattle a great chance to move the ball down the field. On a broken play, Russell Wilson finds, I believe it was Tyler Lockett for the first down after the ball was snapped about 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Wilson made plays, and some call it game management, but I call that playmaking.
I call that luck.
A little bit of it. It's funny. Just quick story. Earlier in the season, I was going to San Diego. I was going to San Diego for the Browns-Chargers game, and Ohio State was playing Indiana, and all I really had was was the game cast, so I could just see it's third day. Long story short, Indiana's got the ball, one chance to win it, 7 seconds left. Ball gets snapped over Sudfield's head. Chance to tie Ohio State late. I have a friend sitting there saying this is what highlight plays are made of, is broken plays like this, and Indiana doesn't get it done, but Seattle does get it done in that situation. A few plays later, they find Doug Baldwin in the end zone, kick a field goal late to take a 10-9 lead, and it's up to Teddy Bridgewater to drive his team down the field. Does a great job. Almost finished the drive with a touchdown. Adrian Peterson couldn't get a first down on 3rd and 1 inside the 10, and they bring Walsh out to kick potentially his fourth and game-winning field goal of the day, and it doesn't go well.
Shank. That's all I got to say. He shanked it. I feel bad for the guy because he was their offense for the day, and, you never know what's going to happen in those situations. I mean, and most people say that was less than an extra point now. There's no reason anybody should ever miss that kick. You know what? The weather's bad. There's all kinds of things, and it's a pressure situation. Stuff happens. The guy will be back next year, whether it's with the Vikings or not, I don't know, but he'll have his chance again. I do feel bad for him. He owned up to it at the end of the game, was completely stand up about it, unlike a lot of players. So I give him a lot of credit for that, but he really did shank that.
All right, so poor Vikings fans. You have this situation where you could slay the dragon, the team that's won the NFC the last couple of years. you're in a golden position to do so, and you don't get it done. It's a lot like '98, maybe not quite as much on the line as when the Vikings were 15-1 and their kicker hadn't missed all year, and they're in the NFC Championship game against the Atlanta Falcons. Gary Anderson misses his first kick of the year, and Atlanta goes on to get drubbed by Denver in the Super Bowl that year. Vikings fans growing up, they had the stigma of being the only team to lose 4 Super Bowls. Then the Buffalo Bills came along. Just tough sledding for the Minnesota Vikings. Last outdoor playoff game that they're going to play. Their new stadium will be ready next year, so it'll be interesting. Staying in the NFC North, the Packers go into Washington. Kirk Cousins and the Redskins find a way to score in every which way but an extra point. They get the safety, the field goal, the touchdown early. They're up 11-0, and here come the Packers.
Yeah, the Packers got off to a terrible start. It looked pretty much like what we've been seeing for the last several weeks, and then Aaron Rodgers finally realized he's Aaron Rodgers and started taking them down the field pretty much every drive. He had a little bit of help from the running game, and they got something going with there, so that definitely contributed. But Washington only had so much in them, and like I said, Aaron Rodgers finally realized he was Aaron Rodgers. The defense locks down a little bit on Green Bay's side, and 35 points later, they got a winner.
Chris, we've had you on the Sports Byline Sunday show with Andy Dorff, who is a big Packers fan, and going into Week 17, he's talking about the Packers-Vikings game and saying, maybe if the Packers lose, it's not so bad because they'd have to host Seattle versus going to Washington. Going to Washington might be a better deal for them. And as it turned out, he may have been right, because Seattle did play tough despite only putting up 10 points and putting them up late. You think the Packers are glad that they went to Washington rather than hosting the defending NFC champs?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, Seattle is a very different beast when it comes to defense. I mean, whether their offense is clicking or not, they hold a lot of teams down regardless. So I think that I was actually surprised that Minnesota really hung in there against them as well. I mean, Adrian Peterson didn't do anything in that game. And Washington, though they've improved this year, they're just not the same team as Seattle, plain and simple. So I think Green Bay got the draw they really needed to get. And I'll be honest, though, I have a hard time seeing them getting past Arizona.
Yeah, that's a tough division, the NFC West. While we're talking about the NFC West, they're going to have slightly different travel. The Seahawks, the Cardinals, and the 49ers are going to have slightly different travel plans next year because the St. Louis Rams will no longer be the team of St. Louis.
Yeah, they're going to go from a 4-hour flight to a 1-hour flight. So you got the LA Rams are back. How about that?
I think it's great for all of the teams out in that division. Creates a natural right. Arizona's got the Suns with the Lakers, the Coyotes with the Kings, the Diamondbacks and Dodgers. This just fuels the Phoenix Los Angeles rivalry, and hopefully it's worth watching. Which means that someday Jeff Fisher won't be the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, I mean, the rivalry aspect of it is good, but I just don't like this whole moving teams thing. I guess out of the 3 cities, the most likely one to move was the St. Louis one. I don't like the way it was done, but they did have the lowest attendance and everything as far as of the 3 teams. I personally don't think any of those teams should have moved. I think the fan bases overall supported them pretty well in those locations. I hate the money grab that it is of this moving, maybe. And I don't think this is over yet by all. I mean, obviously, San Diego has the option to move to L.A. now, and Oakland is allegedly back in Oakland, but not if you listen to Mark Davis. It sounds like they're still hunting for a new home.
Yeah. Do you think that the Jed York and the Niners would be willing to take on a tenant in Santa Clara until the Raiders can figure out where they're going, or are they back at O.co?
Oh, they're back at O.co for as long as they can tolerate it, which I guarantee you won't be long.
And there are other stadiums in the area. Memorial Stadium in Berkeley was just got a facelift. Palo Alto's actually hosted the Super Bowl, so I mean, I would think that those are both acceptable digs, considering that the Rams are going to play at the Coliseum, which is 200 years old, until they get their new building built in Inglewood. So moving and shaking in the NFL. The only comment I really have on it is It's peeling scabs off old wounds. I remember losing a football
Sure.
team. You might remember. You might remember that we used to have a team in Cleveland called the Browns up until 1995.
Yeah, used to have a team in Cleveland called the Browns. Love that comment.
All right, guys. All right, let's talk about what's coming up this week. We hinted at Chiefs at Patriots. Chiefs red hot, but they are facing the New England Patriots in the playoffs, and Kansas. This wild card teams, this type of Kansas City team just doesn't seem like a team that's going to go down to Bill Belichick's Patriots, regardless of what happened on Monday Night Football in 2014.
I disagree with you. I don't see Kansas City's luck continuing. I know that you've been on their bandwagon all year, and I've been against them all
Oh no,
year.
I like New England. I like New
okay.
England.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood you then. But yeah, I don't think they're getting past New England. I just think New England's going to be healthier. They've had the bye week off. Regardless of this Chandler Jones stuff going on, I do think New England's going to dominate this game.
All right, 3 weeks ago it was Packers at Cardinals. Cardinals win at 38-8 and really flex their muscles there. Any change this time around? Obviously, a bigger setting for Rodgers and the Packers, and maybe they have a little bit of momentum playing last week, whereas the Cardinals were on the couch and really taking it to the Redskins late.
I don't think the result's going to be different. I think Green Bay may score a few more points than they did last time, but I just think their defense and their offense is going to be entirely too much for Green Bay to handle.
Did the Packers get their offensive line issues worked out, or are we going to see Aaron Rodgers running for his life again with this Cardinals pass rush?
The Cardinals pass rush versus the Redskins is night and day. So I think you're going to see Rodgers struggle some. Like I said, I think they'll get into double digits versus points, but I don't think they're going to score enough points to keep up with Arizona's offense.
All right, on Sunday, you have the defending NFC champions, the best team in the NFC over the last 2 years, going into this year's best team record-wise, the 15-1 Carolina Panthers. What are you looking for in that one?
A very low-scoring game. Both very good defenses. I was very optimistic. I said before when we previewed the playoffs, I thought Seattle, Carolina, and Arizona, any of those three could go to the Super Bowl. I don't know if Minnesota's defense was that good or if just Seattle just didn't play that well because of the weather conditions. Obviously, it's going to be much warmer in Carolina than it was in Minnesota. So I think this will be a lower scoring game, but I still think it's going to be a toss-up for me, to be honest. I could see either team winning this game. But let me go back though. I will say I think experience is going to come out at the end, and I think Seattle will squeak it out.
I think there's something wrong with Seattle. Not wrong like there are with the teams that have been at home since the end of December, but I think that there's something that just isn't there. I think it's it might be Marshawn Lynch. It might be a little bit less that they have on the defensive side of the ball. It might be the fact that they made a bad trade moving Max Unger for Jimmy Graham, who they haven't been able to use and won't be available. So I actually like Carolina. I think there's something to their 15-1, and I think that they're going to shut down that Seattle offense, especially if they're relying on Christian Michael to carry the load. I mean, let's be frank. Marshawn Lynch's give a shit factor at this point is just so low that you can't really trust him.
Well, I don't disagree with that at all. But do you believe that the playoff experience matters at all when it comes to these games?
I do for the most part, but I don't know that it's enough to trump
big enough in this game.
Here. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So Denver and Pittsburgh. This is a familiar matchup. We saw Tim Tebow beat the Steelers in an outlier of a football game many moons ago. At this point, Denver seems to. Both of these teams, it kind of seems like it depends on which team shows up. Is it the good version of the team or is it the bad version of the team? I don't like the instability of the quarterback situation in Denver, even though you do have a Hall of Famer in Peyton Manning, who just has never really played well in the playoffs. It's just by volume. I think that he's gotten to a couple of Super Bowls and managed to win the one, but. I look at the Pittsburgh like cockroaches, man. You could stomp them, you could drop a nuclear bomb, and they're still going to be walking around sniffing away at your hamburger.
So I see three keys to this game.
Okay.
Peyton Manning for Denver, Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown for Pittsburgh. If Brown isn't playing and Roethlisberger is really as hurt as he is, unless Peyton Manning plays as horrible as he did earlier this year, I just can't see Pittsburgh beating Denver. If Peyton Manning plays like he did earlier this year, where he's turning the ball over left and right and can't make more than a 5-yard out throw, Denver's in big trouble.
All right, so it seems like we have a consensus on the Patriots, consensus on the Cardinals. Where'd you end up with Broncos Steelers?
It's just going to depend on the three players. If Roethlisberger plays and is semi-healthy, I'm going to go with Denver either way on this one.
I am going to go with Denver. I don't think Roethlisberger is going to be healthy. I think that Antonio Brown's going to struggle. And as long as Peyton
I don't think he's going to
does,
play. I don't think Antonio Brown's going to play, and I think Roethlisberger is going to struggle. I agree. That's why I said unless Peyton really screws the pooch, I think Denver's going to win.
Yeah, I'm kind of, going into this one, looking at Pittsburgh beating Cincinnati before that game last week, I would have said Pittsburgh's got a good shot at this one. But I think that I think the NFL is going to do everything in their power to give us one last Manning versus Brady playoff game. And, and I think we deserve it too. Brock Osweiler might be the better choice for Denver, but it's not going to happen that way. So, Broncos, Patriots, Cardinals, Seahawks or Panthers. Yeah, I think we're in a little bit of a disagreement on that.
Yep.
Should set up an interesting conference championship weekend. One last thing before we get out of here. Adam Gase to Miami. Does that move the needle for you at all?
I think it's a good hire for them. It'll be interesting to see how he does with Tannehill. So he's been great with all the quarterbacks he's worked with. I think that's only a positive for Tannehill. It's just going to come down to can he control Ndamukong Suh and some of those other players down there. If he can, then I think Miami is going to be on the up. Otherwise, it'll be the same old story.
A lot of that's easier said than done. He's Chris Green. You can follow him on Twitter at CGRN731. I'm Jeff Rich at ByJeffRich. You can follow the show at Suits Laterals. And you can find the show at suitsandlaterals.com or on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. You have any comments for us, feel free to tweet us. Leave comments in the feedback section. And get back here next week as we'll be breaking down the divisional round and looking ahead to the conference championships game in the National Football League. For Chris Green, I'm Jeff Rich. Have a good week, everyone.